The Atlantic was cold and gray in March of 1945, and the women packed into the cargo hold of the transport ship had stopped counting the days. They had lost track of time somewhere between the Belgian border and the English coast, somewhere between capture and whatever came next. Roswitha Bowman pressed her spine against the cold metal wall of the ship and tried not to think about food. She was 27 years old, a trained military baker, and her hands, once strong and purposeful from years of kneading dough, were now cracked and idle. For 3 years, she had fed German troops across occupied Europe, rising before dawn in concrete bakeries, producing the dense dark loaves that sustained soldiers who believed they were defending something worth defending. She had believed it too once. Around her, 32 other German women sat in the dim hold in silence. They were the survivors of a women's auxiliary corps unit captured near the Belgian border during the Allied advance. Radio operators, nurses, administrative clerks, supply officers. Young women who had served a cause that was now visibly, undeniably, catastrophically collapsing. Crystal Meyer, barely 22, sat beside Roswitha with her blonde hair dull from months without proper washing. Her fingers, once practiced and quick across telegraph keys, now picked nervously at the frayed hem of her gray auxiliary uniform. "Do you think they'll kill us?" Crystal whispered in German, her voice almost swallowed by the sound of the engines. Roswitha considered the question longer than she would have liked. The British guards had treated them correctly: minimal rations, basic medical attention, mechanical processing, but no one had struck them, and no one had threatened them. They were problems to be categorized and shipped elsewhere. "No," Roswitha finally said. "Americans follow rules. We'll be imprisoned and put to work, but not killed." Across the hold, Gertrude Seidler, the eldest at 31 who had spent her war as a senior battlefield nurse, crouched over a younger woman burning with fever, tending to her with nothing but torn cloth and a cup of water. Trudy's medical instincts had never stopped, even when she had nothing left to work with. In the corner, 19-year-old Laura Krauss wept quietly, knees pulled to her chest. She had been an administrative clerk, comfortable behind a desk, entirely unprepared for the violence that had swept through their unit when Allied forces overran their position. "What do you think America will be like?" Crystal asked. Roswitha closed her eyes and tried to remember the last real meal she had eaten. The image that surfaced was not a military ration or a field canteen. It was her grandmother's kitchen in Bavaria, warm, yellow-lit, smelling of cinnamon and butter on a Sunday morning before the world fell apart. She pushed the memory down and said nothing. The transport trucks rolled through the gates of Camp Sheridan just after dawn on March 23rd. Roswitha caught glimpses of pine trees through the canvas covering, green branches heavy with morning dew, and the sight struck her as almost painfully beautiful after weeks at sea. The camp sat in rural Pennsylvania, far from any major city. When the guards ordered them out in heavily accented German, Roswitha's first impression was of space. Enormous, improbable, almost offensive amounts of space. Neat rows of wooden barracks stretched across cleared land, surrounded by wire fences that somehow seemed less suffocating than the cramped hold they had just left. Captain Vivian Ashford stood waiting as the German women assembled in uneven lines. She was perhaps 40, steel gray hair pinned beneath her officer's cap, with eyes that measured everything at a glance. "Welcome to Camp Sheridan," she said in clear English, waiting for the interpreter to translate. "You will be housed in Barracks C and D. You will follow all regulations, maintain discipline, and conduct yourselves appropriately." She paused. "In return, you will be treated in accordance with the Geneva Convention. You will receive adequate food, medical care, and shelter." Adequate food. The words hung in the air long after the interpreter finished speaking. Roswitha could not remember the last time anyone had used that phrase in reference to her. If this story stayed with you, the best thing you can do is hit like and subscribe. It costs you nothing, and it tells the algorithm this kind of storytelling is worth showing to more people. That's how this channel grows, one person at a time deciding it's worth it. The intake process was efficient and impersonal. Names were recorded, possessions inventoried, though most of the women had almost nothing left, and medical examinations were conducted by Lieutenant Ruth Callahan, a young doctor with gentle hands and exhausted eyes. She examined each woman carefully, noting malnutrition, untreated injuries, the various ailments that accumulate in months of deprivation. When she reached Roswitha, she turned her hands over slowly, studying the cracks and calluses. "Baker?" she asked through the interpreter. "Yes," Roswitha answered, surprised to be seen as anything other than a prisoner number. The lieutenant nodded, made a note on her chart, and moved on. The barracks were simple but clean. wooden bunks with thin mattresses, gray blankets that smelled of soap, a wood stove, windows that let in actual sunlight. After the darkness of the ship's hold, the brightness felt almost painful. Crystal claimed the bunk above Roswitha's. "It's better than I expected," she whispered in German, once the guards had left. Trudy, already organizing the limited space with characteristic practicality, did not look up. "Don't get comfortable. We don't know what work they'll assign us or how long we'll be here." Laura sat on her bunk, still looking as though she had not fully arrived. Then, from somewhere across the compound, a smell drifted through the barracks window. Roswitha couldn't identify it. Something cooking, something warm. But it made her stomach cramp with a sudden animal sharpness. That first evening, Captain Ashford addressed the women again in the common area. This time she spoke more slowly, allowing the interpreter to convey not just words, but meaning. "You will work. You will contribute to this camp's operation. In exchange, you will be fed, clothed, and housed appropriately. Work." The word landed differently than Roswitha had expected. Weeks of passive transport, of being moved like cargo from one holding point to another, had been harder than captivity itself. Her hands needed something to do. Her mind needed somewhere to go that wasn't the slow, circling inventory of everything she had lost. The women were divided into work assignments based on their previous skills. Trudy and 2 other nurses were sent immediately to the camp infirmary. Laura and the administrative clerks were assigned to the records office. Crystal and the radio operators were put on maintenance and cleaning duties, their technical skills irrelevant in captivity. When Roswitha identified herself as a baker, Captain Ashford's expression shifted slightly. "We have a kitchen staff shortage," she said through the interpreter, "but placing you there requires approval. For now, you'll work in the laundry." Roswitha nodded, understanding the unspoken concern. A baker had access to food, to tools, to things that could become dangerous. Trust had to be earned before it could be given. The dining hall that evening provided their first American meal. Roswitha sat between Crystal and Edel Troutman Hoffman, a supply officer who still carried herself with rigid military bearing even in captivity. Metal trays were distributed, and American kitchen workers served portions with mechanical efficiency. Roswitha stared at her tray. There was meat. Actual meat, though she couldn't identify the cut or the preparation. Mashed potatoes, pale and smooth with butter that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Green beans, canned but abundant. White bread, soft and impossibly light, nothing like the dense, dark loaves she had spent years producing. "Is this real?" Crystal whispered in German. Around the table, other women were staring at their trays with the same expression. Not quite hunger, not quite disbelief, but something between the two that had no name. This was not minimal rations. This was more food than Roswitha had seen on a single plate since 1943. Laura began to cry quietly, her fork trembling in her hand. "Eat," Trudy said softly, slowly. "Your stomachs aren't used to this." Roswitha took a small bite of the mashed potatoes. The butter, the salt, the warm creaminess hit her tongue like a memory she had forgotten she still carried. She closed her eyes against the emotion that rose without warning. This was enemy food served by enemy hands. But it was given freely, without cruelty, without the starvation rations that had made every meal in the final year of the war a reminder of defeat. She ate slowly, deliberately, and said nothing at all. That night, Roswitha lay in her bunk and stared at the wooden ceiling. The barracks were quiet except for the sound of breathing, and from somewhere nearby, the muffled weeping of a woman she couldn't identify. She thought about her mother in Hamburg. She thought about her younger sisters, Emma and Sophie, and whether they were still alive. She thought about the strange, disorienting mercy of this place. The soap-smelling blankets, the butter on the potatoes, the American lieutenant who had looked at her hands and seen a baker rather than an enemy. She did not know what came next. She did not know how long she would be here, or what she would return to when it was over. But for the first time in months, she was warm. For the first time in longer than she could remember, no one was shooting at anything. She pulled the gray blanket to her chin, and against all expectation, she slept. Morning at Camp Sheridan began at 6 o'clock with a bell that echoed across the compound like something between a wake-up call and a verdict. Roswitha opened her eyes to an unfamiliar ceiling and needed a moment to remember where she was. Around her, the other women stirred slowly, their movements cautious, as if the day might break if handled carelessly. The laundry building sat at the eastern edge of the camp, a long wooden structure filled with industrial washing machines, drying lines, and the permanent smell of hot soap and steam. Roswitha reported there with 6 other German women, none of them certain what to expect. An American corporal named Daniel Morales demonstrated the machines through gestures and simple commands. He was young, perhaps 25, with patient brown eyes that held no obvious hostility. He simply showed them what needed to be done, then stepped back and let them do it. The work was hot, repetitive, and physically demanding. Roswitha spent hours feeding sheets and uniforms through the washing machines, hanging wet laundry on long lines, folding dried items into the precise rectangular standards the military required. Her baker's hands, accustomed to kneading and shaping, adapted quickly to the new labor. The mindless repetition gave her what she needed most, somewhere to put her attention that wasn't her mother, her sisters, or the hollow space where the war used to be. During the lunch break, Corporal Morales distributed sandwiches, each one wrapped in waxed paper. Roswitha unwrapped hers carefully, studying the construction as if it were something to be understood before it was eaten. White bread, thin sliced ham, yellow cheese, a single leaf of green lettuce. Simple, but more substantial than anything she had eaten in months. "Thank you," she said in careful English, one of the few phrases she had. Corporal Morales nodded, his expression neutral but not unkind. "You're welcome." Private Francis Wong monitored the laundry facility from his position near the door, rifle slung loosely over one shoulder. He seemed more bored than vigilant, occasionally glancing at a folded newspaper tucked into his belt. Roswitha watched the Americans from the corner of her eye as she ate. They moved through the camp with an ease she had never seen among German military personnel, joking with each other, their interactions casual despite the clear structure of rank. There was food everywhere, not hoarded or rationed, but simply present. Kitchen workers carried supply boxes without urgency. Guards ate apples as they walked their routes. Administrative staff drank coffee from ceramic mugs as if coffee were an ordinary thing that existed in ordinary quantities. This casual abundance disturbed Roswitha more than hostility would have. She had been taught that America was weak, soft, stretched thin by the strain of a two-front war, barely holding together. What she was seeing suggested something entirely different. A nation with resources so vast that even its prison camps operated with surplus. She folded another sheet into a perfect rectangle and said nothing. That afternoon, Sergeant Walter Novak entered the laundry to inspect the work. He was perhaps 50 years old, large and unhurried, with graying hair and the weathered face of someone who had spent decades working with his hands. He was the head chef, Roswitha learned through whispered translations, responsible for feeding hundreds of soldiers and prisoners every day. His inspection had nothing to do with laundry. He moved through the building slowly, pausing at different stations, watching the German women work. When he reached Roswitha's station, he stopped. She was folding a stack of kitchen linens, her movements methodical. Each fold exact, each rectangle identical to the last. Baker's habits. "You fold like someone who's worked in kitchens," he said, and waited while Corporal Morales translated. Roswitha hesitated. She wasn't sure whether honesty would help or harm her. "I was a baker. 3 years. Military bakeries." The sergeant nodded slowly and asked several questions through the translator. What kind of bread she had made, how large the ovens were, what quantities she managed daily. Technical questions, asked with the precision of someone who already knew the answers and was testing whether she did too. Finally, he said something brief to Corporal Morales and left. "He says you might be useful," the corporal translated. "But first you work here. Prove you follow rules." The days developed a rhythm. Wake at 6, laundry until noon, lunch break, laundry until 5, dinner, evening hours in the barracks. The routine was numbing but safe, and safe was something Roswitha had not been for a long time. Her body slowly accepted that immediate danger had passed. She began sleeping through the nights without waking in panic. On the 5th day, something changed. Roswitha was hanging sheets on the drying lines when a smell drifted through the open windows and stopped her completely. The wet sheet hung forgotten in her hands. The smell was sweet, rich, layered. Cinnamon first, then butter, then sugar, then something deeper and warmer underneath. Something baking. Something made not for survival but for pleasure. Her eyes closed without her permission. The scent transported her instantly, not to any military bakery, not to any moment of the last 3 years, but further back, much further. Her grandmother's kitchen in Bavaria, Sunday mornings before the war. Warmth and yellow light and the absolute certainty that the world was a safe and generous place. She had not smelled cinnamon in years. The spice had disappeared from German stores by 1942, rationed, then reserved for military hospitals and high-ranking officials, then simply gone, as if it had never existed. "What is that?" Crystal appeared beside her with a basket of wet laundry, her face carrying the same transported expression. Roswitha didn't answer. All along the drying lines, the other German women had paused. Every one of them had turned toward the windows. The smell drifted from the main kitchen building across the compound, carried on the morning breeze like a rumor of another world. Roswitha forced herself back to work, but the scent stayed. It permeated the laundry building, mixing with the soap and steam, impossible to ignore. Throughout the afternoon, she found herself stopping mid-motion, breathing slowly, trying to hold that sweetness a moment longer before the work took her back. It reminded her of everything the war had taken. Not in the sharp, devastating way that her mother's absence reminded her, but gently, persistently, like a door left slightly open onto a room she was no longer allowed to enter. That evening in the dining hall, the source of the smell remained invisible. The prisoners received their standard portions: meat, vegetables, potatoes, good food, more than adequate, but nothing sweet. Nothing that explained the cinnamon. Roswitha ate carefully and asked no questions. Sunday morning brought unexpected news. Captain Ashford announced through interpreters that prisoners who had demonstrated good behavior would receive additional privileges. Mail would be permitted, supervised letters to and from Germany through the International Red Cross. Work assignments might be adjusted based on skills and camp needs. Small personal items could be purchased from the camp commissary with earned credits. The news about mail moved through the barracks like electricity. Connection to home, however fragile, however delayed, was something none of them had allowed themselves to hope for. Roswitha thought of her mother in Hamburg. She thought of Emma and Sophie. She had received nothing from them since her capture, and the not knowing had carved a hollow space in her chest that no amount of American food could fill. After breakfast, Sergeant Novak appeared in the dining hall and crossed directly to the table where the German women sat. Through Corporal Morales, he addressed Roswitha without preamble. "Captain Ashford approved a trial assignment. You work in the kitchen starting tomorrow. Supervised, restricted duties. You follow every instruction exactly." Roswitha stood before she realized she was doing it, nearly knocking over her water glass. "Yes, thank you. I will work hard." The sergeant studied her for a long moment, his expression giving away nothing. Then he nodded once and left. That afternoon, a woman named Mrs. Mildred Thornton arrived at the camp. She was perhaps 60, a Red Cross volunteer with white hair and gentle eyes that held genuine kindness, the uncomplicated kind, not the managed kind that officials performed. She came weekly to help prisoners compose letters that might have a better chance of reaching Germany, if written in proper English and routed through official Red Cross channels. Roswitha sat across from her at a scarred wooden table, struggling to find a place to begin. "Start with simple facts," Mrs. Thornton said through the interpreter. "Your mother will want to know you're safe." "Dear Mama," Roswitha began, and Mrs. Thornton wrote it in careful English script. "I am alive. I am in America, in a prison camp, but I am treated fairly. I have food and shelter. Are you alive? Are Emma and Sophie alive? Please write to me if you can. I think of you every day." The letter felt grotesquely inadequate. It could not hold the complexity of what she wanted to say. It could not explain that her captors fed her better than her own country had in the war's final year. It could not describe the butter on the potatoes, or the soap-smelling blankets, or the American corporal who said you're welcome without sarcasm. It could not ask the question she was most afraid to ask. Not are you alive, but do you still recognize the person I've become? Mrs. Thornton sealed the envelope and marked it with the proper Red Cross protocols. "Mail is slow," she warned. "It may be months before you receive a reply, if you receive one at all. Germany is in chaos." Roswitha nodded. She had already made peace with waiting. Waiting, at least, still contained the possibility of good news. That evening, she lay in her bunk and stared at the ceiling while Crystal read above her in silence. Tomorrow she would be in a kitchen again. Her hands would return to work they understood, even if everything around them had changed completely. The thought both steadied her and unsettled her in ways she couldn't fully separate. "Roswitha," Crystal said from the bunk above. "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" "Yes." "Why did he choose you?" Roswitha was quiet for a moment. "Because he needs a baker, and because maybe he can see that I only want to work, not cause trouble." A pause. "What if they don't trust you?" "Then I'll earn it." She closed her eyes. Somewhere across the compound, in a kitchen she had not yet entered, the memory of cinnamon still lingered. Tomorrow, she told herself. Tomorrow she would find out where that smell came from. Monday morning, Roswitha reported to the main kitchen at 5:30. The camp was still dark, the compound quiet except for the distant sound of a guard changing shift somewhere near the front gate. The kitchen, by contrast, was already alive. Sergeant Novak stood near the industrial ovens, reviewing preparation lists with Corporal Morales. Two American kitchen workers moved at different stations, their movements practiced and unhurried, preparing breakfast for 300 people as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. The smell of coffee filled the room. Real coffee, dark and strong. Another thing that had vanished from German life years ago. Sergeant Novak handed Roswitha a white apron and a cap to cover her hair. Through Corporal Morales, he laid out the rules without ceremony. "You work only at stations I assign. You touch nothing without permission. You ask questions before acting. Private Wong will be nearby at all times." Private Wong nodded from his position near the door, rifle slung over his shoulder. His presence was meant to be a reminder, and it was, but not of danger. It was a reminder that trust was a thing to be measured out slowly, in small amounts, like a rationed spice. Roswitha understood that. She could work within those boundaries. Her first task was peeling potatoes, mountains of them, destined for breakfast hash, piled in large metal bins beside the prep table. Her hands moved automatically, the peeler becoming an extension of her fingers before the first minute had passed. It was mindless work, but being in a kitchen again, any kitchen, under any circumstances, felt like returning to herself after months of being misplaced. As she worked, she observed everything. The Americans used ingredients with a casualness that made her chest ache in a way she hadn't expected. Butter measured in pounds, not fractions of rations. Eggs by the dozen, cracked and discarded without ceremony. Milk delivered in large metal containers that were simply opened and poured. And then there was the sugar. It sat in massive bags on the storage shelves along the far wall. More sugar than Roswitha had seen in 3 years, stacked without ceremony beside the flour and the salt. Sugar had become a memory in Germany by 1942, first rationed severely, then reserved for military hospitals and senior officials, then simply absent from ordinary life as though it had never existed. She remembered the last cake she had baked with real sugar, a birthday torte for a colonel's daughter in 1943, made from a ration she had been quietly hoarding for weeks, knowing it would be the last time. Here, American kitchen workers spooned sugar into their morning coffee without looking up from their work. Sergeant Novak moved through the kitchen with the authority of someone who had been doing this for decades. He adjusted seasonings without tasting, corrected temperatures with a glance, repositioned a cutting board with 2 fingers, and kept walking. Roswitha recognized mastery when she saw it. This was not a man who had learned to cook for an army. This was a man who had always cooked, who had been cooking since before the army existed in his life. Around 8 o'clock, after breakfast service ended and the kitchen quieted, the sergeant approached her station. She had peeled every potato without complaint, the pile of clean tubers stacked uniformly in the rinsing bin. He examined her work briefly. "Tomorrow you work the bread station," he said through Corporal Morales. "Standard military loaves. I show you our recipes and methods. You follow exactly." Roswitha nodded, keeping the relief off her face. Bread was familiar territory. Even if American methods differed from German ones, flour and water and yeast responded to the same fundamental logic everywhere on Earth. The sergeant paused before turning away. "You were military baker. How long?" 3 years. Mostly dark rye. Some wheat when supplies permitted." He considered this. Dark rye is good bread. Honest bread. He said something else in English that Corporal Morales didn't translate, then returned to his work. Roswitha did not ask what it was. That afternoon, her hands cramped from the unfamiliar motion of the peeling work. But the ache felt purposeful, earned, the good kind of tired that comes from contributing something rather than simply enduring. In the chaos of defeat and captivity, that small distinction mattered more than she could explain. Tuesday morning, Roswitha arrived at the bread station to find Sergeant Novak had already prepared the workspace. Massive mixing bowls waited on the prep table alongside industrial bags of flour, containers of yeast, measuring implements scaled for feeding hundreds. The setup was different from German military bakeries in its scale, but identical in its logic. Bread was bread. It required the same fundamental honesty regardless of the flag flying outside. The sergeant demonstrated his technique through action rather than extensive translation. His hands moved through the dough with the confidence of deep repetition, not thinking about what they were doing, simply doing it, the way Roswitha's own hands had once worked. She watched carefully, noting the differences. Americans used more fat in their dough, added milk where Germans used only water, preferred a lighter, softer crumb over the dense nutritional weight of dark military bread. When he stepped back and gestured for her to begin, Roswitha approached the mixing bowl with something close to reverence. Her hands sank into flour for the first time in months. The sensation moved through her fingers and up her arms and settled somewhere in her chest. This was her craft. This was the work that had defined her before the war redefined everything. She measured according to his specifications, her movements precise. Flour, water, yeast, salt, and then a shocking measure of butter that she added without comment, adapting without resistance. Her hands began to knead, finding the rhythm her body remembered even when her mind was occupied with other things. The dough transformed under her palms, shaggy and resistant at first, then gradually yielding, then smooth, then elastic, pulling back against her hands with the quiet energy of something alive. Sergeant Novak watched without speaking. Corporal Morales stood nearby, ready to translate if needed, but the sergeant seemed to understand that some things required no translation. Roswitha shaped the dough into standard military loaves, her hands creating uniform sizes through practiced estimation rather than measurement. Each loaf received the same attention, the same care. This was how she had always worked, with precision, with seriousness, with the understanding that someone's hunger depended on what her hands produced. While the loaves underwent their first rise, the sergeant gestured toward a different station. Large sheet pans waited on the prep table alongside a collection of ingredients that made Roswitha stop breathing for a moment. Flour, butter, sugar, cinnamon. Special order, Corporal Morales translated. Officer's mess wants cinnamon rolls for Thursday breakfast. Sergeant says you watch today, help tomorrow, make them yourself by next week if you prove capable. Roswitha nodded, unable to trust her voice entirely. The smell that had haunted her since the 5th day had a source, and now she was being invited into its creation. Sergeant Novak began the demonstration without ceremony. His technique was different from traditional German methods, more indulgent, more generous with fat and sugar, emphasizing pleasure over substance. He rolled the dough thin with practiced efficiency, spread it with softened butter all the way to the edges without hesitation, then showered it with a cinnamon and sugar mixture in quantities that seemed almost reckless. The rolls were shaped, placed in pans, left to rise into soft, puffy spirals. When he slid the pans into the oven, the kitchen changed. The smell built slowly at first. Warm dough, then butter beginning to caramelize at the edges, then the cinnamon releasing its full depth into the heated air. Roswitha stood at her bread station pretending to monitor her loaves, but her entire body had oriented itself toward those ovens, like a compass finding north. The smell triggered the memory again, and this time it came without warning and without mercy. Her grandmother's kitchen. Sunday morning light through white curtains. The feeling of being small and completely safe in a world that had not yet decided to destroy itself. She gripped the edge of the prep table and breathed slowly. The timer rang. Sergeant Novak removed the pans. Each roll was golden and perfect, the edges where they touched each other soft and yielding, the exposed tops lightly crisped. He prepared the glaze with the same unhurried efficiency, powdered sugar, milk, a measure of vanilla, then drizzled it over the warm rolls in long, slow passes. The white icing melted at the edges, running into the spirals and settling into pools of sweetness. Roswitha watched from across the kitchen. She told herself she was observing technique. She was not observing technique. The sergeant cut a single roll from the corner of the pan. Steam rose from the exposed interior, revealing the layers inside. Cinnamon and sugar swirled through pale, tender dough in a tight spiral. He placed it on a small plate, added a fork, and crossed the kitchen to where Roswitha stood. Through Corporal Morales, he said simply, "You taste. You cannot make what you don't understand." Roswitha stared at the plate. This was not prisoner rations. This was the officer's special order, made for American command staff, not for enemy captives. Her hands were unsteady as she accepted it. "Sergeant Novak," she managed in careful English, "I cannot. "This is not for prisoners." The sergeant's expression did not change. "You are a kitchen worker now. Kitchen workers must know the food they make. This is not a gift. This is training. Eat." She sat on a nearby stool, fork in hand. The other kitchen workers had quietly paused their tasks. Private Wong shifted his weight near the door but said nothing. The kitchen held its breath. Roswitha cut a small piece. The roll separated without resistance, the dough soft all the way through, the cinnamon sugar dark and fragrant at its center. She raised the bite to her mouth. The moment it touched her tongue, something inside her came undone. The sweetness was not simply sweet. It was layered: butter, cinnamon, vanilla, the deep, complex warmth of properly developed dough. All of it alive and immediate in a way that her body had apparently been waiting years to feel again. It was warm, it was soft. It was generous in a way that nothing in her recent life had been. Her eyes closed. A tear escaped before she could stop it, running down her cheek in silence. Then another. Her shoulders began to shake as she took a second bite, unable to prevent what was happening, unable to explain it even to herself. This was not hunger. She had been hungry many times, and this was not that. This was something older and more complicated. The body's memory of what life was supposed to feel like, surfacing without permission after years of suppression. "I'm sorry," she whispered in German. Then again in English, her voice barely holding together. "I'm sorry, I haven't tasted sugar in years. Real sugar, used like this." Corporal Morales translated quietly, though her tears required no translation. Around the kitchen, the American workers exchanged glances. Private Wong looked away, his expression caught somewhere between discomfort and something that was not quite discomfort. Even Sergeant Novak's impassive face shifted slightly, something moving behind his eyes that he did not allow to reach the surface, but that was visible nonetheless. Roswitha forced herself to eat slowly, to stay present, to taste each bite, rather than devour the whole thing in the desperate way of someone who doesn't trust that food will still exist in 5 minutes. She had become so accustomed to eating for survival that she had forgotten food could be something else entirely. When she set down the fork, she straightened her back and wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Thank you, Sergeant Novak. I understand now what you want me to create. I will learn your methods." The sergeant nodded once. He returned to his work without ceremony, and the kitchen resumed its rhythm around him. But something had shifted in the room, something quiet and difficult to name. Roswitha had not been seen as a prisoner just now. She had been seen as a baker being taught her trade. For the first time in longer than she could remember, those two things felt like they might be able to coexist. The days that followed established a new pattern in Roswitha's life. She arrived at the kitchen before dawn, worked until mid-afternoon, then returned to the barracks where the other German women waited with questions she didn't always know how to answer. Some showed genuine curiosity about what the kitchen was like, what the Americans said, whether the food was really as abundant as the rumors suggested. Others watched her with something harder in their eyes. Edeltrautmann Hoffmann confronted her one evening in the barracks common area, her military bearing still intact despite everything. "You're becoming too comfortable with them," Edel said. "You forget we're prisoners, that these people are our enemies." Roswitha looked up from the English primer Mrs. Thornton had given her. "I forget nothing, but I choose to work well and cause no trouble." "What does hostility accomplish here?" "Pride," Edel said. "Loyalty to our country." Roswitha set the primer down carefully. "Our country put us in positions where we were captured and then left us with nothing. These Americans feed us better than Germany did in the final year of the war." She paused. "What loyalty do I owe to a system that has already collapsed?" The conversation ended without resolution, the silence between them filling with everything neither woman could fully say. The tension revealed something real. The divisions forming among the prisoners were not about personality or temperament. They were about what each woman was willing to look at directly and what she needed still to look away from. In the kitchen, trust developed in incremental steps that Roswitha did not rush. Sergeant Novak allowed her to work with progressively less supervision, testing each expansion of freedom with a new, slightly harder task before granting another. She proved consistent, following instructions precisely, asking questions before acting, never moving toward areas or supplies outside her assigned duties. Private Wong spent less time actively watching her and more time with his newspaper. Corporal Morales began teaching her English during the slower moments between breakfast and lunch preparation. "You need words," he explained simply. "Sergeant Novak won't always have a translator available. You need to understand instructions directly." The lessons were practical: kitchen terminology, common commands, the specific vocabulary of quantities and temperatures and techniques. Roswitha absorbed the language hungrily, recognizing that communication was its own form of freedom in a situation where she had very little of either. Within 2 weeks, she could understand most of the sergeant's instructions without waiting for translation. The shift was small, but significant. She was no longer dependent on an intermediary to participate in the work, no longer receiving the world at one remove. She existed in the kitchen now as a worker among workers, not merely as a supervised problem. Corporal Morales talked with her during breaks the way people talk when they have decided, without announcement, to treat someone as a person. He told her about his family in New Mexico, his mother's cooking, the smell of green chili roasting in the fall. He described his plans for after the war, opening a small restaurant, or maybe just going home and eating his mother's food for a year without doing anything else. "She'd probably like you," he said one afternoon as they worked side by side preparing vegetables. "She respects anyone who understands bread." The casual inclusion in his imagined future struck Roswitha as something she had no framework for. He spoke to her as if she were a person with a future worth considering, not an enemy prisoner whose fate remained undecided, but someone who would simply continue existing after all of this was over. She wasn't sure she had thought of herself that way in a long time. Thursday arrived with the special officer's order. Cinnamon rolls for the morning breakfast service, enough for the command staff, prepared to the sergeant's exacting standards. This time, Sergeant Novak positioned Roswitha as his assistant rather than his observer. She measured ingredients under his supervision, mixed the enriched dough, kneaded it to the proper consistency her hands now recognized by feel. When the time came to roll and fill the dough, he stepped back. "You do. I watch. If you made it this far, you already know what this channel is about. A like takes 2 seconds. A subscription means you won't miss the next one. Both of them help more than you'd think. They're what keeps stories like this reaching new people." Roswitha's hands were steady as she rolled the dough into a rectangle. She spread softened butter edge to edge without hesitation, distributed the cinnamon sugar mixture evenly, then rolled the whole sheet into a tight cylinder with slow, deliberate pressure. The cylinder was cut into uniform pieces, each one placed in the prepared pans with the spiral facing up. Sergeant Novak examined her work, adjusting 2 rolls slightly without comment. Then he said, "Good. You learned quick." Corporal Morales translated the rest. "He says you have baker's hands, honest hands." Roswitha looked down at her cracked, flour-dusted palms. Her grandmother had said the same thing to her when she was 11 years old, pressing dough for the first time at a kitchen table in Bavaria. She said nothing and returned to her work. 3 weeks into her kitchen assignment, the letter arrived from Germany. Captain Ashford delivered it personally during morning formation, her expression carrying the particular gravity of someone who has learned to prepare people for news without knowing what the news is. The envelope was battered, forwarded through multiple Red Cross stations, stamped by 4 different countries, the paper soft with handling. Roswitha waited until evening to open it, sitting on her bunk with Crystal beside her in silence. The letter was from her younger sister Emma, written in February, nearly 2 months ago. "Dear Roswitha, I hope this reaches you. I hope you are alive. Mama is gone. The bombing in January took her and half our neighborhood. I found her in the rubble 3 days later. Sophie and I survived because we were in the countryside searching for food. Hamburg is destroyed. There is nothing left of our street, our home, anything we knew." The words blurred. Roswitha read the sentence again, then again. Her mother, the woman who had taught her to bake, who had pressed her hands into flour for the first time, who had kissed her goodbye at the train station when she left to join the Auxiliary Corps, believing she was sending her daughter to serve something worth serving, was gone. Pulled from rubble 3 days after a bombing that Roswitha had not been there to witness or prevent. "Sophie and I are living in the countryside with Aunt Hilda," the letter continued. "We have little food. The authorities say the war will end soon, that Germany will surrender. Everyone is starving and cold. I do not know what will happen to us. If you are alive, if you can, please stay where you are. There is nothing here to come back to. Germany is dead." Crystal read over her shoulder, her own tears falling quietly onto the bunk. Around the barracks, other women had received their own letters, and the sound of weeping moved through the room like weather. Even Trudy, who maintained her nurse's discipline through everything, moved among the bunks with a look on her face that had nothing to do with medicine. Even Edel sat alone on the edge of her bunk, no letter in hand, staring at the floor. That night, Roswitha did not sleep. She had believed capture was the worst thing that could happen to her. She understood now that she had been wrong in the most painful way possible. Wrong in a way that couldn't be corrected, only absorbed. The worst thing was not being taken prisoner. The worst thing was surviving while everyone you loved was destroyed by the same war you had served. Morning arrived, gray and cold. She reported to the kitchen mechanically, her body moving through the familiar routine, while her mind remained in the ruins of a street she would never see again. Sergeant Novak noticed immediately. He said nothing at first, allowing her to work in silence the way experienced people allow grief its initial right of way. But when she fumbled a simple measurement, flour spilling across the prep table, the scoop trembling in her hand, he stopped her. "Corporal," he said, "ask her what happened." Through halting English and Corporal Morales's careful translation, Roswitha explained the letter. Her mother, the bombing, the rubble. The sister who had written to say there was nothing left to come home to. The words came out flat and orderly, as if she were reporting an inventory rather than describing the end of her family. Sergeant Novak listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "War takes everything from everyone," he said through Morales. "German, American, it doesn't matter. We all lose people we love." He paused, and when he continued, his voice was quieter. "Your mother would want you to keep living, keep working, honor her by surviving well." The simplicity of it broke something open in Roswitha's chest, not because it was profound, it wasn't particularly, but because it was offered without calculation, without the agenda of someone managing a prisoner. It was simply one person acknowledging another person's loss. She had not received that in a long time. She nodded, unable to speak, and returned to her work with tears running silently down her face. Her hands moved correctly. April arrived with warmer weather and the unmistakable feeling that something enormous was ending. News filtered through the camp in fragments. Allied forces deep inside Germany, Soviet troops approaching Berlin, the Reich's infrastructure collapsing faster than anyone had publicly predicted. Among the German prisoners, the news created reactions that were impossible to separate cleanly into relief or dread. Both were present simultaneously, tangled together in ways that defied resolution. In the kitchen, Roswitha had been given complete responsibility for bread production, mixing, kneading, shaping, baking, all of it without direct supervision, with only Private Wong's background presence as a formality rather than a constraint. The work had become a form of meditation. Her hands moved through dough while her mind circled the things it needed to process. Her mother's absence, her sister's precarious survival, the strangeness of being safer and better fed as a prisoner than the civilians of her own country had been in the final year of the war. She baked her grief into the bread the way bakers have always done, not consciously, not as metaphor, but simply because the hands need somewhere to put what the mind cannot hold. The loaves she produced during those weeks were, by general agreement, the best bread the camp had seen. Sergeant Novak said nothing about this directly, but he began displaying them at the front of the serving line rather than the back. One afternoon, Sergeant Novak announced a special requirement. "General inspection next week. Command wants a demonstration of camp efficiency. Kitchen will prepare a special meal." He looked at Roswitha directly, not waiting for translation. "You make cinnamon rolls, enough for the full inspection committee." Roswitha felt the weight of it settle in her chest. This was not a routine officer's breakfast. This was performance under real scrutiny, her work representing the kitchen's capabilities to the people who decided everything about how this camp operated. She spent 2 days practicing, producing small batches to test and refine her technique. The sergeant watched critically, offering corrections in the brief, precise manner she had come to recognize as his version of investment. More butter in the filling. Roll tighter. Space them closer together for softer edges where they touch. Each instruction refined her approach in ways she absorbed without resistance. She was not being corrected because she was inadequate. She was being corrected because he was teaching her seriously, the way a craftsperson teaches someone they have decided is worth the effort. On the third practice day, she produced a batch that made Sergeant Novak pause mid-inspection. He examined the rolls carefully, testing the texture, checking the even browning across the pan, tasting a corner piece with the focused attention of someone conducting a genuine evaluation. A long moment passed. "Good," he said finally. "You make them this way for inspection, exactly this way." The night before the inspection, Roswitha lay awake reviewing every step. Crystal asked if she was nervous. Terrified. "Why? You know how to make them." He said they were good. Because everything I've earned here depends on those roles being right. Not just my kitchen assignment, everything. The trust, the work, She stopped. She didn't have the English word for what she meant, and the German word felt too large for the dark barracks. Crystal was quiet for a moment. "Your mother taught you to bake," she said finally. "Yes." "Then make them the way she taught you, and the way he taught you, and they'll be right." Roswitha stared at the ceiling. It was not complicated advice, but in the dark, in the particular silence of a camp full of women trying to survive something they had not fully named yet, it was exactly enough. The morning of the inspection arrived with a pale, clear sky, and the kind of stillness that precedes significant things. Roswitha was in the kitchen by 5 o'clock, a full 30 minutes before her usual time, standing at her station with her apron already tied, her cap already in place, reviewing the steps in her mind before her hands began. Sergeant Novak arrived 7 minutes later and said nothing about her being early. He simply nodded and began his own preparations. The kitchen filled gradually with its usual crew, the morning moving through its familiar rhythms: coffee, inventory, breakfast service for the camp, the controlled chaos of feeding hundreds of people before the day had fully decided to begin. Roswitha worked through all of it with careful focus, completing her bread production without error, saving her full attention for what came after. When breakfast service ended and the kitchen quieted, Sergeant Novak looked at her across the prep tables. "Now," he said. She began with the dough. Flour measured precisely, yeast dissolved in warm water at the temperature she had learned to test against her wrist. Butter softened to exactly the consistency that would spread without tearing the rolled sheet. Her hands moved through each step with the calm of someone who has rehearsed until rehearsal becomes instinct. The kitchen workers moved around her, giving her space without being asked. Even Private Wong had set his newspaper down and was watching from the door with the particular attention of someone who understands, without being told, that something worth watching is happening. Corporal Morales stood nearby, ready to translate if needed. But no translation was needed. Roswitha and Sergeant Novak communicated in the language of kitchens. A glance, a nod, a small adjustment of the hands that meant more pressure there, ease off here. When the dough had rested and she began to roll it, the kitchen went quiet in the way that kitchens go quiet when everyone present recognizes craft. She rolled the sheet into an even rectangle, her rolling pin moving in long, deliberate strokes. She spread the softened butter to every edge, leaving nothing uncovered, nothing left to chance. The cinnamon sugar mixture went on in a steady, even layer, fragrant and dark against the pale dough, filling the kitchen with the smell that had stopped her at the laundry window weeks ago. She rolled the dough into a cylinder with slow, firm pressure, sealing the filling inside. The knife moved through it in clean, even cuts. Each piece identical, each spiral tight and uniform. She placed them in the prepared pans with the precision of someone who understood that even small details carry weight when everything is being watched. Sergeant Novak stood slightly behind her, hands clasped, saying nothing. When the pans went into the oven, Roswitha exhaled for what felt like the first time all morning. She cleaned her station methodically while the rolls baked, arranging tools, wiping surfaces, restoring order. The habits of a professional kitchen that her hands had never fully unlearned. The smell built slowly, filling the kitchen, then spreading into the corridor beyond, then drifting out across the compound in the cool April air. The timer rang. The rolls came out golden even, perfect, each one risen to exactly the right height, the edges where they touched soft and yielding, the tops lightly bronzed. Sergeant Novak leaned over the pans and studied them for a long moment. He pressed one gently with a finger, testing the give of the dough. He examined the color across the full surface of the pan, checking for any unevenness. Then he prepared the glaze. Powdered sugar, milk, vanilla, whisked together until smooth, then drizzled across the warm rolls in long, unhurried passes. The white icing settled into the spirals and ran slowly to the edges of the pan, pooling in the corners in the way that meant the rolls were exactly the right temperature. He set down the bowl and straightened. "Good," he said. "Not very good, not well done, or I'm impressed. Just good." The single word that, from Sergeant Novak, Roswitha had learned to understand as the highest available praise. She nodded once and began preparing the serving platters. The inspection committee arrived at 11 o'clock, 6 officers in pressed uniforms, accompanied by Captain Ashford and 2 administrative aides taking notes. They moved through the camp in a formal procession, evaluating each facility with the brisk efficiency of people who have performed many inspections and have a fixed amount of time to perform this one. The kitchen was their 4th stop, Sergeant Novak presented the facility with quiet professionalism, walking the committee through the operation in terms of capacity, efficiency, and compliance with military feeding standards. The officers listened, asked several questions, made notes. Then one of them, a colonel with silver hair and the weathered look of someone who had been in the military since before most of the kitchen staff were born, noticed the platters of cinnamon rolls on the serving counter. He paused. "These part of the regular menu?" "Special order, sir," Sergeant Novak said. "Made this morning by one of our kitchen workers." The colonel picked up a roll and examined it briefly, then took a bite. A pause. "Who made these?" Sergeant Novak looked at Rose Witha. She was standing at her station in her white apron and cap, hands folded in front of her, watching the exchange without expression. She did change to Camp Sheridan. Processing began for repatriation, a bureaucratic undertaking of enormous complexity, given that the country these women were being returned to had ceased to exist in any organized sense. Some prisoners were released within weeks. Others, whose roles in the Reich's military apparatus required further review, remained longer. Rose Witha was told she would be among the later group, her military bakery service requiring documentation and clearance before her status could be formally resolved. She accepted this without complaint. She was, if she was being honest with herself, not entirely ready to leave. The kitchen continued its work regardless of the larger world's convulsions. 300 people still needed to be fed every day. Bread still needed to be baked. The cinnamon rolls still appeared on Thursday mornings for the officers' mess, and Rose Witha made them each time with the same attention she had brought to the inspection, not because anyone was watching, but because that was how she had been taught to work. On one of her last mornings in the kitchen, Sergeant Novak arrived earlier than usual and prepared a small breakfast for the two of them at the prep table. Scrambled eggs, toast, coffee, without explanation or ceremony. They ate in companionable silence, the kitchen empty around them, the compound outside still gray with early morning. After a while, through Corporal Morales, who had arrived for his shift and been quietly recruited as translator, the sergeant spoke. "When you go home, you should open a bakery." Rose Witha looked up. "There is no home to go back to. My family's street is rubble." "Then find a different street." He said it without sentiment, as a simple logistical suggestion. "Germany will need to eat. Someone has to bake the bread." She looked at her hands on the table, still cracked along the knuckles, still flour-dusted even on a morning when she hadn't yet begun work, permanently marked by years of a craft she had not chosen so much as been born into. Her grandmother's hands, her mother's hands, her own. "My mother taught me to bake," she said. "I know," the sergeant said. "I can tell." Rose Witha left Camp Sheridan on a Thursday morning in late July 1945. The transport truck that would take her to the processing center in Philadelphia was scheduled for 7 o'clock, which meant she had time for one last morning in the kitchen. She arrived at 5, as she always had, and worked through the bread production in silence. When the loaves were in the oven, she began the cinnamon rolls without being asked, measuring, mixing, rolling, filling, shaping, placing each one in the pan with the same careful attention she had brought to every batch. Sergeant Novak came in at 5:30 and stopped when he saw what she was doing. He watched for a moment, then tied on his apron and took his place at the adjacent station and began his own work, and nothing was said about it, because nothing needed to be. When the rolls came out of the oven, Rose Witha glazed them herself. She drizzled the white icing in long, slow passes, watching it settle into the spirals, pool at the edges, run toward the corners of the pan. She cut one from the corner, the tester's piece, the baker's portion, the one that didn't need to be perfect because it was only for the person who made it. She ate it standing at the prep table slowly, tasting every layer. "Who made these?" Sergeant Novak looked at Rose Witha. She was standing at her station in her white apron and cap, hands folded in front of her, watching the exchange without expression. "She did, sir. Rose Witha Bowman, German prisoner, assigned to kitchen duties." The colonel looked at her directly for the first time. She met his eyes without flinching, the way her grandmother had taught her to meet the eyes of anyone who was evaluating her work. You made it well, or you didn't. Either way, you look at them. "Good work," the colonel said. He said it to her, not to the sergeant. She understood enough English by now to know exactly what he meant. "Thank you, sir," she said carefully. The committee moved on. After they had gone, the kitchen exhaled collectively. Corporal Morales grinned at her from across the prep table. Private Wong actually set his rifle against the wall and poured himself a cup of coffee, which Rose Witha had never seen him do before. Sergeant Novak crossed to her station and stood in front of her for a moment. "You did well," he said through Morales, and then slowly and deliberately in German, with the accent of someone who had clearly practiced the phrase, "Gut gemacht." "Well done." Roswitha's throat tightened unexpectedly. She had not heard German spoken kindly by someone outside her own group in longer than she could measure. "Thank you, Sergeant," she managed. He nodded and returned to his work, and that was all, and it was enough. May arrived, and with it, the news that Germany had surrendered. The announcement came on a Tuesday morning, May 8, 1945, read by Captain Ashford in the compound with an expression that was formal and carefully neutral. Among the American soldiers, there was celebration, restrained but genuine, the relief of people who had been carrying something heavy for a very long time and had just been permitted to set it down. Among the German prisoners, the silence was different. They stood in formation and received the news and said nothing, because there was nothing that could be said that would not be either false or unbearable. The war they had served was over. The country they had served no longer existed in the form they had known. Everything they had believed they were protecting, the homeland, the people, the future, had been consumed by the very machinery they had trusted to defend it. That evening, the barracks were quieter than they had ever been. Even the women who had maintained rigid military identity through everything, even Edel, who had argued longest and hardest that discipline and loyalty were the only dignities left to them, sat in silence on the edges of their bunks, looking at the floor. Trudy moved through the room as she always did, offering what she could, but there was nothing medical to offer here. Roswitha sat on her bunk and wrote a letter to Emma. She wrote in German, and Mrs. Thornton would help her translate it in the morning. "The war is over," she wrote. "I am safe. I am being treated well. Better than well, if I am honest, which I think I must be now. I think about Mama every day. I think about her hands and her kitchen and the Sunday mornings before everything changed. I have been baking here, Emma. Real baking. In a real kitchen. With real ingredients. I made cinnamon rolls last week. She would have loved them. I don't know when I will be sent home. I don't know what home means now. But I am alive and I am working, and I am learning to live inside this strange situation with as much grace as I can manage. Save some space for me at Aunt Hilda's table. I will find my way back to you." She folded the letter and held it in her hands for a moment. Outside, across the compound, she could hear the American soldiers celebrating. Distant voices, laughter, someone playing music on a radio, the sounds of people who had been given back their future. She did not begrudge them that. The weeks after the surrender brought gradual, uncertain change to Camp Sheridan. Processing began for repatriation, a bureaucratic undertaking of enormous complexity. Then something recovered. She had made this. With hands her mother had taught, using methods an American sergeant had passed on across the distance of a war that had tried to make them enemies. The taste was hers now. Corporal Morales walked her to the transport truck at 6:50, carrying the small bag that held everything she owned. "Write to us when you find that bakery," he said. "I will," she said, and meant it. Sergeant Novak was waiting at the truck. He handed her a small waxed paper package without speaking. She opened it on the truck as the camp receded behind her. Pine trees, wire fences, wooden barracks, the kitchen building with its windows still lit against the early morning dark. Inside the package were 2 cinnamon rolls, wrapped carefully, still faintly warm. Roswitha held them in her lap for the entire drive to Philadelphia. She thought about her mother's hands. She thought about Emma and Sophie waiting at a table somewhere in the German countryside. She thought about a bakery on a street she hadn't found yet, in a city she hadn't chosen yet, in a Germany that would need to be rebuilt from the ground up by people who had survived it. She thought about what it meant to make something nourishing from basic ingredients in the middle of destruction. She already knew the answer. She had known it since she was 11 years old, pressing dough for the first time at her grandmother's kitchen table on a Sunday morning in Bavaria, when the world was still warm and the cinnamon was still plentiful, and the future was